Capitalists are typically viewed as great job creators because their businesses create jobs. But the president has taken an action that will threaten many jobs, millions of them. Not just government jobs. We're not talking about contractors either. We're talking about blue-collar jobs. Will you be impacted? Let's get into it. Tariff is one of the president's favorite words. And as he and other people know, when you impose a tariff on a country, they're likely to return the favor. China and Canada just slapped retaliatory tariffs on US goods, and it's hitting hard, especially in Trump country. Trump country is essentially the rural areas throughout the United States. That's where President Trump received the most support during his campaign. That's the main reason he was elected to be the president of this country. Now, what we're talking about in the rural areas, really, we're looking at factories, farmers, and manufacturers. Those are the individuals that will be impacted the hardest. The United States is knee-deep in a trade war again. The last trade war was with China in 2018 during President Trump's first term, but this one seems to be getting a lot more serious. It's going to have a lot more repercussions. So the tariffs, they're already imposing export tax in the United States for their soybeans, for our meat, our coal, even Kentucky bourbon. Why? Revenge. President Trump is squeezing their economies, so they want to squeeze ours. Specifically, agriculture, manufacturing, and energy. The way this impacts jobs is simple. Imagine for a moment you are a bean farmer. You farm beans, and your sales have been doing great. You export your product around the country and around the world. So China and Canada, they're buying your beans. Now all of a sudden they impose a tariff, a 15% tariff. That is eating into your profit margin. So whatever you were making in the past, you now have to increase the price of beans. Otherwise, it's not going to be profitable for you. When you increase the price, the countries do one or two things. One, they either look around at other countries and say, well, I can get it cheaper from Argentina, or I can get it cheaper from Canada, so I'm going to get my beans from somewhere else. Or two, they just stop eating beans. They find an alternative to beans, and they just go without beans. So what that means for you as the bean farmer, as the person who owns the business, you have less sales. And if there's less sales, well, you don't need all these workers, do you? So now you have layoffs. You're like, hey, we had 100 people helping us on the bean farm. Well, sales are down 20%. Let's reduce our workforce by 20%. I'm simplifying it, but you get the idea. So now 20 people don't have jobs. And now without those profits, not only can you not hire and retain, but you can't grow. You can't grow the business because the profits are not there. Because people aren't buying, because you're raising the prices because of tariffs. And that's why they view tariffs as a tax on the consumer. The Brookings Institute did analysis and found over 5 million Americans that work in industries could feel the heat. But it's not spread out evenly. It's deliberately focused on two areas, the Midwest and the South. Why? Is that by accident? Is that by chance? No, it is strategy. China and Canada, they want to target the people who support Trump the most. One, to punish Trump voters, and two, to punish President Trump by hurting his base and hopefully making his base turn against him. That is why Canada and China decided, let's do agriculture. Let's do energy. West Virginia, let's do energy. Let's do manufacturing. Because they could have easily looked at tech and say, well, let's do tech. They're not doing tech. They're not doing luxury brands. They're not doing U.S. banks because those people live in the cities. So they're targeting the Trump voters. Take Sargent County, North Dakota. 60% of jobs there are in tariff-targeted sectors. You take one big employer in that area, say it's a soybean processor, that gets cut, you're talking about 1 out of every 6 people losing their job. It impacts that county's economy, and it has ripple effects throughout the state. If exports tank, layoffs follow. The question's not if the layoffs happen, it's when do they happen. Let's take a look at the 3 sectors being targeted here. Number 1, agriculture. China has a 15% tariff threatening 1.3 million jobs. This is the Midwest bullseye. You're looking at Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska. Farmers, truckers, and processors. And then Canada piles on. They're taxing agriculture too. This is squeezing farmers that are already squeezed. So you had US aid stop buying product from the United States. Previously, US aid, a certain percent of their money was going to buy US agriculture to export it to other cities. That's not happening. So farmers are not getting those sales. And now you have China and Canada imposing taxes. So you're going to have less sales to those two countries. So really, farmers are getting the triple whammy here. They're getting hit by 3 different directions. Next, manufacturing. Canada's 25% tariffs hit 4.8 million jobs. Think auto parts and machinery. It's the factory belt in the South from Alabama, Tennessee, places in between. They're all going to be feeling it. Next is energy. China levies on coal and oil targeting over 500,000 jobs. Southern West Virginia's coal mines, they're vulnerable. Trump is all about drill, baby, drill. But West Virginia only keeps 20% of what they actually drill. The rest is exported around the country, and it's estimated that about 20-30% goes internationally. That's an important number. That's money that they rely upon in order to make sure they remain profitable. And if they're not able to hit that number, it's going to impact jobs. And this could mean smaller paychecks while the people chant American first. And you might be thinking, well, that's just 2 countries. Forget about them. What about all the other countries? When you look at the top 3 countries we export products to, China and Canada are in the top 3. The other one is Mexico. And Mexico will be doing the same thing in April. They're going to be imposing their own tariffs on us. And it's not just jobs, it's everything. Trade wars breed chaos and companies freeze. Why expand? Why have growth? Why build that extra factory if you know that if you export your products internationally, they're going to be heavily taxed by the country? There's no more incentive there for growth. And you never see the jobs that were not created. When you have growth, you have jobs. But this is considered the silent killer because you don't miss what you never had. You stifle growth and the jobs are just not there. Maybe big cities can absorb it, but small towns can't. Okay, let's flip it. Are Trump's tariffs doing any good? President Trump is not doing this because he thinks it's a bad idea. He's not doing this because he thinks he's going to damage millions of jobs. He could still impact millions of jobs, but the way that he's thinking logically is this is going to lure people in to create more jobs in this country. So if you're in China and you want to develop a widget, if you start your factory in the United States, then there is no tariff. You get to keep all the profit. So that's the incentive. He wants to have more businesses come into this country to create jobs to stimulate the economy. Now, whether that happens or not is uncertain. We don't know. There's 2 sides to this. There's one side that says they're not going to do it. And the other side is like, yeah, you will stimulate growth by encouraging companies to build and invest their factories and their headquarter buildings in this country. Now, you as a consumer, a tariff is not always seen as a tax because, for example, Canada has a 25% tax on the US. Now, when we want to buy maple cookies, yeah, if you want to buy from a Canadian-owned company, then yeah, you're going to have to pay that amount. But Canada doesn't have a monopoly on maple cookies. You can buy maple cookies from places in Vermont or places in New York State. There's other alternatives. And when you take those alternatives, then you avoid that tax altogether. But the big question is, are there alternatives for the product that you want? If you're sitting there and you want a Sony PlayStation and Japan has a huge tariff, then you're going to have to pay the tariff because there's no other place manufactures Sony PlayStations than Japan. I'm assuming that Japan does it. It's Japan's brand, Sony. So if you were to look for an alternative, you would have to go for another gaming system. Maybe there's a gaming system that's completely made in the United States. I don't think that exists right now, but maybe there could be. So in that situation where there is no replacement, you will be forced to pay the tax. There's one quote that captures this well. Protectionism seductive because the losses are invisible. So what's ahead? Probably more tariffs, more counter tariffs. He campaigned on this. This was not a secret. This was not like him trying to get rid of 1 million government jobs where it just came like in the shadows of the night. He just jumped on it and he was making these wild cuts with the hatchet. It's not like this. He said it time and time again. He was criticized for saying it, but he's likely going to stick by it. Now, are we going to see dramatic job loss in 2025? We're going to have to wait and see. Now, Trump is also looking at entitlements with the intention of cutting the fraud, waste, and abuse away from it. But recently, some statements were made that got a lot of people worked up about the future of Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. And the White House had to scramble to address those concerns. If you want to know more about that, check this video out next. If you need a federal resume example, check out the links down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.